Good morning, everyone. Turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. I'm going to read verse 1 and verse 4. I think this is probably the most famous chapter in Ecclesiastes, most well known, because it's just really, just simple, beautifully said lesson on all the different things, in life that matter, and how they all have their place in time. Now, my lesson isn't about how everything has its place in time today. It's about a particular group of things that that do have their place in time, and often we don't always grant them their place in time, at least not certain components of this particular group, because we feel pressure to keep some of them under wraps and to not express some of them, and others are totally okay to let out in the open. And of course, I'm talking about emotions. And so I'm going to read verse 1 and then verse 4, which, by the way, is one of the maybe only verse, definitely one of the few verses that directly talk about emotions in general. There are scriptures that talk about anger, and there's scriptures that talk about joy, and scriptures that talk about peace, envy, and things. But there's just, I can't find any other verses, honestly, that just talk about generally emotions, right, and what they are and why they matter. But this one does, and I think it really gives us a powerful, important insight into them. And it says this: to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. Verse 4, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. Now, we love those times we laugh and dance, but sometimes they're not proper. Sometimes they can be in the wrong spot. And as much as we don't like weeping in the morning, guess what? Sometimes it is the right spot for them, the right time for them. So today my lesson is living well, feeling well. God, we ask you to bless this lesson. Let us learn from it. Let us be made better by it. In your name, amen. Now, as I've already started talking about, even before I told you my title, all emotions matter. They all matter. They all matter for good reasons, for positive reasons. A particular emotion, whatever that emotion, plus the right situation or context equals good results. And as an example, even though we don't think of this as positive, I'm going to use anger as my example. Anger plus illegal dumping of toxic waste equals action, equals exposure, equals ending an evil bad practice, right? So if you find out there's someone dumping toxic waste illegally in a stream near you, and you feel at peace about it, oh, that's bad results, right? Yeah. You want to be angry in that moment. You want to bring someone's attention to it. You want to raise a stink. By the way, that has happened in our locale before. There's a spot on the south side of Presque Isle that can't really be used for a whole lot. It's a big spot where for a number of years, a businessman was burying all kinds of things. And now that they've discovered it, that ground is pretty much unusable, just the surface of it. And it's close by Presque Isle Stream. Yeah, so anytime it rains, guess what's filtering through into Presque Isle Stream? So you should feel angry about that, not happy, not joyful, right? So for positive reasons, emotions matter. For positive reasons, anger matters. It's proper in this situation. Emotions also matter for negative reasons, because A particular emotion in the wrong situation equals negative results. Let's talk about an emotion we usually think of as positive. Let's talk about enthusiasm. Hey, enthusiasm, exuberance. Real positive, real high energy, feels great. But meanwhile, we're actually sitting in a lesson on the Holocaust. Oh, I guess me being happy and bubbly and enthused and excited is maybe not the right kind of emotion while we're talking about the deaths, the murder of millions, right? Yeah. So emotions, all emotions matter because A, they, in the right situation, they produce positive results. And B, because often we have them in the wrong situations, they produce negative results. So they matter because of what they can help us achieve, and they matter because of all the things they keep us from achieving because they're not regulated. Now, while it's true that all emotions have a particular place and time, we also know that a community, whether that's a church, a family, a school, business, uh, can't thrive if it lives constantly in particular emotional states. You can't thrive if it's constantly angry, can't thrive if depression is the norm. Learning, growing, loving, exploring, thriving, creating, all of those wonderful things that we want to do as a community and do as individuals. Well, it's not going to really, those aren't really going to happen if we're constantly being triggered or if we're constantly feeling down. So if that's the case, then that means we want to make sure that the emotions we feel most often are the ones that encourage those activities. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life." I want my heart to be a source of life, not a source of destruction, not a source of hate, not a source of of despair, not a source of inaction. I want it to be a source of life. And if it's from my heart that springs life, if it's going to spring life, if life is going to spring from me, the first part of the verse tells us, guess what? It's your responsibility to make sure your heart is in a place where it can. Keep it, guard it with all diligence. You're responsible for the state of your heart. And I'm glad that the scripture used heart here and not mind. Mind we associate with the more logical side of us, but heart, it's the emotional side of us. You're responsible for your emotional state. You're not just a puppet. You're emotionally not just some product of whatever happens to be going on around you. You have some say and some control in your emotional state. So let's think about what we feel most of the time, because if we're responsible for our emotional state, and if certain emotional states are more conducive to living powerful lives, living good lives, to thriving, to creating, to exploring, to loving, to growing, to learning, if it's up to us to make sure our heart is there and we want life to spring from it, first we got to admit where we are. So I want you to think about um, just, let's say, in the last month or two, think about a typical day, maybe a typical week. And right now, I want you to list the 3 or 4 emotions that you feel most in that typical day or typical week right now. Be honest. Don't succumb to that social pressure. Anytime we meet someone in town and they say, "Hey, how you doing?" They're technically, that's a question about our emotion, what we're feeling. But we always say great or good, okay. We always say something really positive when a lot of times we're not feeling really positive. Why do we do that? Because we feel social pressure to do that. We feel like we're expected to do that. But we don't want a conversation with this person about what we're feeling. There's all kinds of reasons, but they're all social reasons, aren't we? Yeah, there's some pressure there to say that. That's why people say those things all the time, because no one wants to really get into their emotional state. No one wants to really talk about that. Well, you don't have to worry about that right now because you're all by yourself. You're listening. You don't have to have a conversation about it. So be honest. We want to get ourselves to the optimum spot so our heart produces life. So let's start with making sure we understand where we are. What are those top 3 or 4 emotions? Maybe it's contentment. Maybe over the last month or 2, you've been totally at peace and content, and everything's been blissful and okay, and you're doing good. Maybe you've been joyful and happy. Maybe. Remember, you got to list at least 3 or 4, right? And I guarantee you that even if you have experienced some contentment or even some joy, oh, I bet on a regular basis you've had a little bit of worry going on, maybe some anxiety going on, maybe annoyance, maybe frustration, maybe outright anger. Think about that. Think about having those things as a regular part of your day. What is that doing for your ability to be the best person you can be? How is that affecting you when you're trying to have a conversation with a loved one, with a customer, with a friend, with your boss? How are those emotions affecting the course of those conversations and the decisions that are made on them? How is it affecting you when you get home at the end of the day? Are you coming home and finding more of the same? Or has it just left you so wiped out? Is it work to put on a happy face or to look peaceful and content? Is it work? Let's talk about that. 2 Peter 2 verse 8 says, "For that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard." See, it's not just the sinner, it's not just the unrighteous that are tormented sometimes. Here was Lot living in Sodom and Gomorrah. He was a righteous man, and yet here he is experiencing a very negative emotion. Torment. Man, this is more than just a little worry, more than just a little anxiety. Torment. So just because you may be experiencing those emotions doesn't mean you're not a good person. Doesn't mean you're not a Christian. So it's okay to admit that. What you're experiencing is a term that I just learned, and I was super excited to learn it because, man, once I learned it, I was like, yes, I've been needing that term because this is something that I grapple with occasionally, and we all do. And the term is emotional labor. Now, what does that mean? Well, emotional labor is the effort we invest and the toll that it takes on us when we're experiencing certain emotions, but we have to suppress them. And what do I mean by that? What is it about working customer service that makes us all say, oh, I hate working customer service? There's some people who love it, but most people think, oh, yeah, I had to work a customer service job for so many years. Why is it that we talk about customer service positions with that tone of disgust or just horror even? Well, it's because customer service representatives, that's a job that entails a lot of emotional labor. They have to be happy, smiling, helpful, engaging, positive, while being screamed at, while being spat on, maybe not on purpose. Sometimes the customer's just mad and the spittle's flying. While people are being maybe even unreasonable. And yet they have to be positive and helpful and keep sending the message through their facial expressions and the tone of their voice that I care. You matter to me. Even though you are screaming and cussing at me right now, even though you've called me names right now, that's emotional labor. And you want to know something? It's not just metaphor to say after a day of working customer service, or maybe after you've had a conversation with that particular family member that's always wearing you out, to say, man, I'm tired. I just feel drained. You do really feel drained. That is a true physiological thing. Your brain is a real thing between your ears, folks. And that's taxing on the neural network up there. It's a real part of you. Your brain uses more energy and calories than the other organs in your body. It's the top one because it's doing a lot. That's real energy being sapped from your cells, that your blood system, your circulatory system, your respiratory system, your lymphatic, all of them are working to support that brain. There's a lot of actual work going on. And so, yes, you literally feel physically and mentally drained and tired at the end of a day full of emotional labor. It is not far-fetched. It is not a metaphor. Now, I want you to think about that. Think about this term emotional labor. And then also think about the emotions that you listed above experiencing. By the way, even when you're not engaged in emotional labor, having to suppress them, some of those emotions still wear you out in and of themselves too. Like being angry all the time, that can just wear you out. Being worried and anxious all the time, that can make you feel like just crawling in bed, right? So they can wear you out in and of themselves. Then there's the emotional labor aspect when you have to suppress them that makes them even more tiring and tiresome and sapping your energy and sapping your will and sapping. I want you to think about those emotions that you listed. How do they affect you in the morning? How do they impact you when you're getting ready or you're on your way to work? How do they impact you when everyone else around your house is starting to get up and you're trying to jostle each other, move through your day and get ready for your day? And you got those emotions there. Is it making those interactions and those moments easier, more fluid, more positive, more enjoyable, more effective? What about during the day? How are those things weighing on you and affecting your decisions? I'm going to tell you, they affect your decision making during the day. I'm going to make a confession to you right now. There are certain people that we all work with that wear us out more than others. You want to know something? Sometimes that affects my decision about whether or not I want to go eat in the dining hall, the cafeteria. It's true. There are times when, if I go there now, I know that person's going to be there and they're going to want to talk about such and such. And yeah. And I was like, this is one day when I think I'm just going to go down the road to the store, eat something in my room. Right? Yeah, absolutely. They affect your day. Make you make decisions that aren't the best decisions. Right? Because let's be honest, the stuff I can go get out of the little heat under the heating lamp at down the road at the store is not good for me. I'm making bad decisions for my health because I don't want to have to endure that particular conversation. So these things are affecting you through the day, right? How's it affecting you after you get home or at the end of the day? What emotions are you experiencing? What of those emotions are you actively triggering in yourself by switching on the TV and watching particular things? How's it affecting when you try to go to sleep at night? Now that we've gotten an idea of where we are emotionally and how this impacts us throughout our day in our relationships and our actions and our choices in the places we even are willing to go and things we're willing to do, what emotions would make life different? What emotions would instead put us in a place where we're making better decisions, where we're having better interactions with friends, family, and coworkers, would make us more effective, more dynamic, more creative, more excited to get to work in the mornings, more excited to come home and see family? What emotions would help us be that best self? What emotions would get that heart of ours that we're supposed to be guarding, would get it into a place where it is in fact issuing life, where life is springing from it? What emotions do you think would put you there? So just like you thought of 3 or 4 emotions the top emotions that you've been feeling. Let's come up with another list. Maybe there's one or two on the original list that you still want to keep. But for all those you don't want to live with those constantly anymore, that they're not doing you good and they're affecting you in a negative way, causing you a lot of emotional labor maybe. Try replacing those. Let's come up with 4 or 5 though. Let's add one more too. 4 or 5 emotions that you want to feel, that if you lived with those more often, you would be a happier person. You would be a more excited person, enthused about life. You would be a nicer person. You'd be a better coworker, a better father, a better mom. What emotions would optimize your abilities at work? What emotions would make you a better friend? What emotions would make you more sensitive, more caring, more encouraging to your family members, if your people around you? List 3 or 4. Maybe thoughtfulness. Let's not make this pie in the sky stuff. In other words, you can't live exuberant and absolutely thrilled all the time, right? You want some that are lower energy too. So, like thoughtfulness, calm, happiness, joy, right? Determination's a good one. That's not absolutely positive. It's kind of off in the middle somewhere, but it's got some energy to it. And determination, that's a good one, right? So just maybe those aren't the ones you want, but list 4 or 5 that you really want to be a bigger part of your day because you can see how they would improve your life and your experience and your effort. 1 Timothy 4:12 says, "Let no one look down on your youthfulness, but rather in speech, conduct, love, faith, and purity, show yourself an example for those who believe." We want to be an example, don't we? And our emotional states are directly impacting the kind of example we're setting. Whether it's anger or whether it's kindness, whether it's negative, I don't like to say negative because, like I said, all emotions have their place, but whether it's aggressive, hostile, maybe, or whether it's open, whether it's energetic, whether it's focused, whatever it is, I guarantee you it's showing up in speech, conduct, love, faith, or purity. It's showing up there. So, action steps. Now that we've seen where we've been, and now that we see where we want to be, how do we get there? Well, we've done the important work of experiencing and identifying, labeling what we've been doing, what we want to do. Now we've got to come up with a way to regulate and adjust. We need to identify the internal and external things that put us in these undesirable emotional states. What's going on in your life, internally and externally? It's not just everyone else's fault the way you feel, right? No, it's partially your fault. There are certain ways of thinking that make you feel worse, right? For example, I'll admit this. Whenever I make a mistake, like maybe it's something I should know better than to do, and somehow I still skip a step and mess it up or something, I have this really, really bad habit of telling myself, "You know better than that, dummy," and call myself a dummy, right? No positives come from that. No good stuff comes from me doing that to myself. That's an internal thing I do that puts me in a less productive state, in a less happy, less fulfilled state. I need to change that. I need to replace it with something positive. Instead of saying, "Dummy, you know better than that," you say, "I made this mistake here, but I figured out how to correct that, mistakes in other places. Let's see if I can figure this one out too." Right? How can I change my patterns so that I avoid that in the future? That's productive. And that puts me in a position of building strength, building character. Then there are external things that put us in these undesirable emotional states. We don't have total control over those, but we do have some control. In other words, we can carefully, curate our situation so that we only have conversations about certain things or with certain people whenever we are ready for them. Right? Can't avoid them altogether, but we can do things like that. How can we mitigate these effects? How can we change these situations, these relationships, these internal ways of seeing and thinking? How can we change those to mitigate the effect so that we're not living in that particular emotional state of mind? What steps can you take in the moment? Say you find yourself feeling this way. You're like, oh my God, here I go down this road again. Oh, I'm getting upset. I'm getting mad. I'm wanting to lash out. I don't like when I'm here. How do I get myself to that better state that I knew I wanted to be? Like instead of being angry, being determined. How do I get to that spot? Because maybe anger is usually a response when something unjust has happened. There's some inequity that needs to be fixed. And it's that injustice and that imbalance that drives us nuts, right? So what's a better response? Instead of being angry, being reasonable and determined. What are some strategies? And for that particular case, I see an injustice, and rather than go to anger and lash out, instead I say, okay, nope, I'm going to do that. I'm going to list the things that I think are wrong with it and think about ways to fix those. I'm still a little bit heightened emotional state, but it's not anger. It's a strategy. It works, by the way. Anger, you feel out of control, right? It's good to have a little bit of it, but don't stay there because when it's happening, you feel out of control. This step gives you some control back, gives you some power back. So that's regulation and adjustment. You see where you are, start thinking about what causes you to be that way, and come up with some specific strategies for changing. And then another way to help us live in that spot where we have maximized our emotional potential is to also come up with some very clear, specific behaviors, things we do that demonstrate we're living in that optimal state. Let's say caring is one of the emotions you listed you want to experience. You want to experience care and empathy for your fellow human beings. Well, what are a couple of behaviors that would demonstrate that you're definitely doing that? And this is called the clipboard test. Let's pretend that throughout your day, there happens to be someone standing nearby. You're not aware of them, but they happen to be standing nearby with a clipboard, and they're marking down things that you do and say. These behaviors that we're talking about that demonstrate you're living in that optimum place, you want it to be something that they would notice, that they would be able to see and write out, oh, he or she did that. In other words, it can't be just some nebulous thing that you never know if you accomplished. Like I want to feel more affection and more empathy for my fellow human beings. And the way I'm going to prove that I'm doing it is I am going to love them with all my heart. Yeah, what does that look like exactly? What does that sound like exactly? No, we're not. That's what you want to do. Good. But that's still really the internal thing. What would demonstrate that on the outside? What are the behaviors? Well, I'm going to make sure when people start talking to me that I take time to actually listen and have a conversation with them. Oh, no, I can watch you do that. If I'm that person with the clipboard, well, look at there. There they are being caring and kind and sensitive and compassionate. Right? So think of some behaviors. You've got your words now, the things you want to feel on a regular basis. You've got some things you can do to move yourself from those places you don't want to be to the place you do want to be. Now finally list for yourself some things you can make sure you're doing. These aren't the only things, by the way. Just because you have these on the list doesn't mean these are the only things you can do. But if you have 2 or 3, they give you ideas of what the other stuff might look like, right? But list 2 or 3 things that you could do if someone was watching you, they would notice and know that you were feeling that emotional state. They would notice you and say, oh, this person is really is really a happy person. Um, they actually greet everyone that meets them with excitement and 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 say hello with a smile, right? Those are external behaviors they can notice. So list those things, those behaviors that will prove to you and to others that you are living in that emotional state. All right, I love you. That's all I have for you today. Please take care of yourselves. Be safe, be well. Don't forget prayer requests to text the text thread so that we can know everyone's prayer requests. Sister Barbara has none. For myself, just pray for us all going back to school this week. And other than that, I love you, and we'll see you next Sunday. And it looks like next Sunday we're going to have an indoor service. We're going to be socially distanced, but we are going to have it inside. So we look forward to seeing you then. Take care.